Hello, everyone. Judy May Murphy here. How are you all doing this evening? Thank you so much for showing up. I feel like we're a tribe already. There's just a really great number of you, mostly women, some men. And we are here to talk about what exactly is codependence, or some people call it codependency, but I believe the correct term is codependence. We're going to be really looking at three different areas this evening, the areas of how your codependence was formed or anyone's codependence was formed. What does it look like? How does it show up? And what does it cost you? And there'll be lots of juicy things that ways you probably haven't thought of yourself before, ways of understanding. Some of the things might be triggering or might be things that will cause you to remember uncomfortable incidents. So, what I would say is that, just be ready, hold yourself tight, know that this is a safe place. I've got you. And if any emotion does come up, it's coming up to be healed rather than coming up to show up in the same way as it did before. But I actually find the whole subject matter of codependence to be so fascinating and so freeing. Anytime I do any talk, online or on stage or go on the radio or anything, I kind of tune into what is it that I really want to achieve. And right before this talk, what came up was that I want to really go deep into, like, in a really like deeply honest way, into how does it feel to be codependent. I'm a recovering, or you could even say recovered codependent. I've just been at this for so long. And it is so different. I didn't realize before that there was anything wrong with me, if you like. I didn't realize that I had any kind of a condition. I thought that just other people were unreasonable or life was unfair. And the more I learned and the more I continue to learn about codependence, the more I am free from that. And just being able to actually enjoy your life and get to do the things you want to do, and just live mostly good bits rather than before it was maybe on a good day 50-50. And now, even if something comes along that is quite disappointing, I have tons of energy and emotional bandwidth to deal with it. I don't kind of collapse or go into overwhelm or think my life's not working or cry. That was a big one. I used to cry all the time. Anyone who knew me back in the early 2000s can testify to this. I would cry. Anything, like any event I'd be at, I'd be sitting in a corridor crying to someone. And I thought it was because I was sensitive, but I didn't realize that there was very specific things going on. And as we get specific with them over the next hour, you can start to see that a lot of the answers, a lot of the healing, a lot of the cure, if you like, is in just knowing what's going on. Because sometimes we don't even see what's going on in a clear enough way. And just knowing that can cause you to behave in a different way, to think, to feel, to act in very different ways. So that is my wish for you, that happens. Now, when we talk about codependency, we normally talk about it just in terms of the effects, kind of the aftermath of the battle. So we'll say things like, I know I'm codependent because I'm single again and the last guy broke my heart again, right? Or we'll say something like, I always let people walk all over me, or how come I'm really talented at what I do and I don't make nearly as much money, or I'm not nearly as famous or nearly as successful as these other people who aren't as good as I am. Or we'll look at the fact that we're just kind of low grade, terminally, in a very dull way, disappointed. And we'll say that's what codependence is. Or we'll wait until we've overworked ourselves again doing stuff for other people, and we'll say, oh, that's because I'm codependent. Or we'll do a people pleaser act, like we will pretend we don't mind if we don't get the last slice of whatever's going around the table, and we really do. And we'll kind of like navigate it according to that, and we'll say to ourselves, okay, the next time, if I haven't had as much food as others and I'm still hungry, I'm going to say it. Or we'll say, the next time I'm not going to end up with someone like that and I won't get my heart broken. And we try and navigate according to the various incidents rather than going back to the core cause. Why did it show up that way again. Why was it that you ended up broke, disappointed, single, whatever it was you didn't want to be, ill? That's a big one for us, codependents, is illness. I had a little chat with my sister the other day about our childhood, and it's one of our favorite themes to get together and do some healing. Um, and she reminded me just how ill I was all the time. And she said, well, because you were so ill all the time, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, yeah, I really, really was. But you know what? That was all of the cortisol and the tension creating so much acidity in my little body that I just would break down and become ill. So for a lot of us codependents, we end up just with a tiny percentage of the energy that we would like for making our dreams come true. And so this is why we've got to get this dealt with. And again, to reassure you that it gets way better, way better. I mean, my life is like night and day. I feel like I'm finally in my life, not kind of floating above it and behind it a little bit, and, joining in and then disappearing off again. I feel I'm actually in my body, in my life, really unafraid. I used to be terrified all the time, and used to jazz it up, like, dress it up like saying, oh no, I'm not afraid, I'm just not ready yet, or I don't really want to do that. So, rather than talking about codependence in terms of how the effects, the different symptoms, if you like, that it has on our life, today we're going to look at it in terms of, where does it come from? How does it show up? And then really get in touch with why and how we need to turn this around now. Okay, so first of all, the phrase. A lot of people don't like the phrase. That's okay. I'm not crazy about the phrase because it doesn't really do the job that it's supposed to do. But it does a much better job than some of the other alternatives phrases that are out there. Like things like people pleaser or narcissist magnet or broken empath or these kind of phrases do a less good job. So let's have a little look at where the word codependence comes from. It comes from the Alcoholics Anonymous um, groups, where back in the 50s they started to, or was it, no, it was the 60s and 70s, they started to realize that what was really holding back many people with problems with alcohol, what was really holding them back from healing was that there was someone around who was an enabler. So the alcoholic was dependent on the alcohol, but there was someone else near them who was dependent on the alcoholic. They needed to be the one that looked after. They needed to be the one that was maybe superior or more capable. They needed to be the one that was more loving. They needed to be the loyal one. And once the alcoholic would start to heal themselves, the other person just didn't know who they were. So they would really push, sometimes in subtle ways, saying, "Well, listen, just have one; it won't matter," or just by, you know, threatening, to leave the marriage or something, they would end up putting the alcoholic back at square one. And so these people were called codependents. So as I say, the alcoholic was dependent on the alcohol, then the other person was dependent on the alcoholic. But you needn't be involved with an alcoholic or even an addict in order to be codependent, as I found out. Once I got rid of I was codependent on narcissists for a very long time. Hugely successful men, out there doing just great big things in the world, millions and millions of dollars, or very, very famous, something like that. That was what I was dependent on, right? So they were dependent on the fame, I was dependent on them. They were dependent on the money and the power, I was dependent on them, right? But then I found out that once I kind of kicked them to the curb and once I drew really good boundaries and stopped attracting them, suddenly I started to attract guys who were like absolutely, I don't like to call anyone a loser, but really in the loser place, really not doing anything. And then became fixated with fixing and helping them. Or else I would become codependent on my career. So there's lots and lots of different ways that you can be codependent. So we're going to look at all those different ways tonight. There's like 5 main areas in which you can sort of notice how you're being codependent, even when the players change. Because that was the really confusing thing to me. I was like, hold on a second. I'm not going for the bad boys anymore. I'm not going for the A-listers anymore. What's going on here? And I'm not going for, I'm looking after myself. So how come? But realizing what these core symptoms were and just dealing with it at its core was really necessary. Another thing that was really necessary was to look at how it was formed. So I could see that my way of doing life seemed like the way to do life. It just seemed really, really obvious. So for me, what was really interesting was, oh, by the way, can you guys just put your hands up so I can just make sure that you can hear me okay? I don't know if I did that at the beginning. If you can just wave at me, that would just be awesome. Hi, guys. Thank you so much for that. Okay, brilliant. Um, so what I learned in my family of origin, and for many of you, it'll be something very similar, was that it wasn't safe to just completely be me. And my sense of myself wasn't reflected back to me. So if I was, really cranky about something, the message I would get would be, it's not okay to be cranky. Cranky isn't okay. Or I'd be ignored or I'd be distracted. But kind of having someone reflect back, you are tired, you are hungry, you are annoyed about this. It didn't happen. I didn't get a sense that I kind of existed, that I was there. So instead, I created a role for myself that was around the people I was aware of. I wasn't aware of myself as, a functioning little human being, as a thing of wonder, a thing to be celebrated and protected. But I was aware of other people as creatures to be appeased and helped. And that if I did that, if I showed up in a very, very helpful way, I would in some way exist. Like with my mother, it was that I would be praised, like I'd be the good girl, and with my father, it would just be that I would avoid his disdain. And for some of you, it was more serious than that. Even for some of you, it was, that unless you acted in a certain way, you would be physically hurt in some way, or you would go without food, or you would be really mocked and made to feel like nothing, like you'd just be reduced to shreds, right? So whatever it was for you, that's where it came from. So it came from that. Now you could have gone down the route of creating a false self and living from that false self and saying, well, the hell with them, I'm awesome, forget about it. But instead, what you chose was to try and make it all okay, try and manipulate the system, try and kind of, deflect people's attention, or, maybe if you had an alcoholic parent that you went and you thought that if you fetched their drink for them or if you made them happy, they wouldn't drink so much. Or, if you had a workaholic parent, as I did, you would think that if you were somehow charming or got them talking on some subject, that they wouldn't go out again to go back to the office to work. So that's how you learned how to do this. And when you were a kid, it was an awesome thing to do because you had no guidebook, you had no clue how the world works. And so this was a really pretty good interim solution while you were living in that very toxic place. Problem is, though, when we leave that toxic place, we often just go and recreate toxic places that allow us to play the same role, maybe in a different way. Maybe we had an alcoholic parent and then we go for a workaholic spouse. Maybe we had uh, someone who was just very, very cold and distant. Maybe your parents were very, very cold and distant. So, we thought that we would marry someone who's the opposite of that. And we ended up then becoming the cold and distant one within that relationship. So in some way, and you'll be able to see this for yourself, in some way you set your life up so that you repeated that for two reasons. The one idea that's really popular in psychology is so that this time you can have mastery over that thing, over that set of circumstances. But really, a lot of it is just simply how to do that. You know how to do codependent really well. And I'll even catch myself doing it to this day, and either stop myself or just be aware that I'm doing it. Where if I'm around some people who are very powerful, very influential, I'll suddenly become lovely rather than honest, rather than saying, no, I don't want for us all to go to this restaurant because I won't be able to get good vegan food. I'll be like, well, these are fascinating people. Yeah, let me go. So I'm not claiming that you'll ever get to a point where you won't play that. But there is like an upside. Again, we often talk about codependency just from the downside. But what we're looking to do is we're looking to have to stop the downside from dominating. But then we're left with the upside. Upside is awesome. Upside is the fact that we see what other people need and want. We can be very, very attuned to people. And then when we turn that on ourselves, we can finally become very attuned to ourselves. We're lovely to be around. People tend to really, really like us, right? So there are a lot of upsides to being codependent. We've got to learn to identify and manage the downside. So what exactly does codependence look like? Sometimes it does look like, the big dramatic thing where you are, writing to someone who's on death row while simultaneously looking after your flatmate who's a meth head, right? And you're just like run ragged trying to manage everybody. But often it shows up in much more subtle ways. It shows up in ways like somebody says something and suddenly you're just that little bit less in love with your dream. Or that you kind of, you pull back because you don't want to be pushy and suddenly you lose something that you would have liked. And then you convince yourself that you don't mind. That's a big, big mantra of the codependent mindset is I don't mind. It's okay. Whatever you want. Right. So it can be very, very subtle. And so don't think that that because you are so awesomely efficient, like if you got on this call, I imagine that you are, you're efficient, you're capable, you have great dreams, you're making great stuff happen. And maybe there's no longer enough pain for you to feel an urgency around taking care of this codependence. But what I often see with clients is, they'll come and they'll get coaching, like they'll do the 3 hour initial coaching package, and then they will kind of go away, even though I say, look, you really need some training around codependence, or you really need some training around spotting narcissism, or whatever it is. They said, no, I'm fine, I'm good, I'm good. And they'll go away and they'll come back maybe a year later, maybe 2 years later. Rarely is it longer than 2 years later. And they'll just be in disarray again because they haven't dealt with that thing. In the meantime, the awesome structure of their life and the great things that they're doing has kind of kept them afloat, has kept the codependency at bay. But it's not enough just to have it there, but sitting in the hallway. You've got to actually have it dealt with. You've actually got to invite it in, look at it. And it's tough work. It's long work. It's like, a lot of tears, a lot of anger, a lot of regret. But I'd much rather that you went through that now over a couple of months than, doing it when you're like 80 years old, and if only, right? We don't want that. We do not want that. Okay, so the first pattern, as they call it, around codependence is a series of denial patterns. And that is where you pretend to yourself and others that it's okay. And you kind of say to yourself, unless it's unbearable, then it's okay. I can handle it. And that can show up as you've always got just about enough money to get by, or just do the things that you want to do, but never any extra. It could, and you're sort of saying, no, it's fine. I don't mind. That's good. I've got enough, right? Or, or it could be that you are saying, I want more money, but behaviorally, you're saying, I'm okay with just the bare minimum to do what I want to do, right? Other denial patterns would include things like, you settle within relationships. So you're having to like try much, much harder than people ought to be trying. You're putting up with too much. You're constantly trying to manage your partner. And you're telling yourself it's okay because they've got all these other great qualities, or it's okay because now they understand this, or it's okay because it's better than being single, or, you'll have your version of that where you're just in denial. Now, denial is the interesting one because it's like the fact that you're in denial makes it harder for the idea to get through, for the realization to come through. And that's why it's really important that you get in some kind of group where you could be looking at this week after week after week, and then suddenly you're like, oh yeah, you know what, I do that. There was something that it took me ages to work out, that I was in denial about it. I was like, it's fine. I self-isolated like crazy for huge parts of my life, and I was like, no, it's fine because I'm writing my book. No, it's fine because I'm very busy at work. No, it's fine because I like reading books. I like being on my own, without looking at the fact that you are self-isolating to try and protect yourself from the pain you've been through in the last few years. So pretending to yourself and others that it's all okay, and the biggest part of that is pretending to self. Yeah, pretending to self that you actually are okay in this job, in this body, in this whatever, right? So this is something that really, really needs to be looked at. settling for, really, really low standards in certain areas of your life. You might have wonderful standards when it comes to how you dress and the places you hang out and the adventures that you have. But then you might be married to someone who just doesn't celebrate you, doesn't notice you, even abuses you, emotionally or otherwise. So again, denial's a tricky one because of its nature. It's the hardest one for you to kind of get to grips with. The next one then is low self-esteem patterns. And so what is self-esteem? Esteem is esteeming the self. It is a series of actions. It's not just a feeling. It's not just self-love. It's not just ego. It's actually things that you do, ways that you speak to yourself, um, activities that you partake on your own behalf, tasks that you do that only benefit you. But as codependents, we often do things that benefit others, and we leave a ton of stuff that would only benefit us. We let it go. So that might be if you live on your own, maybe your apartment is a mess, and you go and you help someone else out with their kids. Very simple example, right? So low self-esteem patterns. So it's something like making money. You have to get out there and you have to do something for you, for your future self, in order to make money. So a lot of codependents find it harder to make money because you're making money for a future self. And if there's no big, strong feeling of that self, if you're constantly just denying that self, suppressing that self, feeling that, that person somehow isn't as real as the other real people today, then you're going to end up in that kind of difficulty. And the reason is because when you were little, you never were encouraged to have needs and wants. Your needs and wants were troublesome to the people that were raising you. That anything from that look of annoyance to and parenting is very, very hard. So please, all you need to do is be good enough around this. So please don't let this spiral you into how you're treating your kids. You're treating your kids well. Codependents tend to do that. But when it came to you, like you were told, it was communicated to you that your needs were not as important. So the solution that you came up with, little genius that you are, the solution that you came up with, and it did work at the time, was to just not have needs and wants. I remember one time when we were really little, the family next door came around. They had three girls, triplets, and a younger brother, and we had two girls a year apart and a younger brother. So the families were pretty matched. And they all came around, and there was only, this is just such a kid story, right? There was only one of a certain type of bowl. I think my mom had bought special new Chinese bowls, and we were drinking soup out of them. But there wasn't enough. So one person was going to have to drink out of the old boring bowls. And the kid that offered to do that, she got so praised for that. She got so much praise and attention for that I then learned to take that position. I'm sure there's lots of other times I learned it, but that's the thing that I really remember. That she took the awful thing, and that made her better. And I continued to do that for decades, right? And that's what we do with low self-esteem patterns. We don't recognize what we really want. We would have been much healthier if my mom had just, drawn straws or given us all the old bowls that we were quite happy with, or found another way. But overpraising a kid for self-denial, if the kid is already sensitive to that they're already headed in that direction, it can be quite damaging. So part of low self-esteem patterns is that we've got to learn how to recognize and ask for and then meet our needs. So if we ask for it and it doesn't get met by someone else, we've got to go find another someone else to meet those. So people will, when they're in codependency recovery, they'll say, oh yes, well, I'm now getting much better at asking my husband to listen to me or asking him for affection. And I'd be like, well, how's he doing with that? And then she'll look at the fact that, oh, he's still terrible at that. Is that good enough for you long term? Do you want a life of that? Or do you want to actually have someone who will be better at it, who can do the job? Like, it sounds like he's now willing to, for whatever reason, but it sounds like he actually can't. So you've got some decisions to make around that. But we don't like to make those tough decisions because they feel unkind or unfair to us because we're so used to putting ourselves last. Other things that are also part of low self-esteem patterns are and that we find it hard to complete projects because again, who's the beneficiary of that? Us. If there's a weak sense of us, then it's very very hard to complete a project because we're completing it for us. But think of all the times we've helped someone else to complete their project, right? So that's low self-esteem patterns. Remembering that self-esteem, it's not people when they think about low self-esteem patterns, they think about people just sitting around being depressed. No, very often it's a very active state. It's an active state of doing stuff for other people, and doing very self-effacing stuff. So the next one then is compliance patterns. And oh wow, we really do excel at this. Those of us who are codependent, we are so good at this. This is where we like just fit in, right? This is where we fit in, where we look and we see where the gaps are in the system, where the leaks are, and we just plug those leaks and we just pretzel and twist ourselves. Like I often think of myself when I see those online gifs and little videos about octopuses. Apparently, it is octopuses, not octopi, in case you're wondering. But octopuses and how they're able to, get themselves into these ridiculously little places. Like they can, a huge big octopus can get themselves right inside a tiny little shell. I'm like, yep, I get it. Or they're in this cupboard and they can there's a tiny little slit under the door and they can get out through that. They can just make themselves so small and so nothing and just work away at that in that position till they get themselves somewhere else and not necessarily somewhere better. So that's what compliance is. It's where we're too loyal, where we stay too long with a person or a situation or a project. Codependence will often make the statement, um, I can't. Sorry, I've got a question from someone. Yeah, so people will often make a statement along the lines of, well, I'm really loyal, and I'll get them to look at that. What does that mean? Because often when you're codependent, you're loyal to everything except you and your dream. And when I'll put that to a client, they'll often go, yeah, because that's how it's been for their whole life. That that they are loyal to everything else except themselves, and so the idea that that might not be an okay thing for you to be doing to yourself can be quite a new idea. Or if you're good at doing it, if you're good at self-championing and being non-compliant, standing up for yourself in some areas, maybe you're not good in others. For some people, they're good at it at work and not good at it in the home or with the extended family. For others, they're good at it with the extended family, or in their love relationship, and then they're not good at it when it's with strangers. Or so there's different ways that this can show up. But it's about staying too long. It's also about giving in so that others don't get angry or sad. Oh my gosh, I was so good at that. My mom had to just have this, like, she didn't even have to give the look. People talk about the look the parents give. My mom had this like pre-flicker that might or might not have turned into the look. And I would be on that. And I would be instantly offering, doing things, changing myself, complying, complying, just saying, yes, your reality and your needs are more important to mine. Let me be subservient to that. Also, the other thing that codependents do is having this way that you can be hyper vigilant for cues from others, like that pre look that I talked about with my mom. That's because I'm hyper vigilant, not just vigilant for, oh, hold on a second, there's the look. It's hyper vigilant. It's like constantly scanning for trouble that might show up if I'm not behaving in a certain way, rather than just relaxing and letting whatever's going to show up, and letting it show up with people being annoyed or angry or, having their say or their moment, and me just then deciding, how am I going to join in with this or am I going to walk away? I was always like making the decision ahead of time that I was going to, prevent this from happening, or I was going to react in this certain way, or if they said this, then I would do this, and if he didn't call back, then I was going to call around to the bar. I mean, just it's endless and it is exhausting. It's exhausting, and sometimes we graduate out of doing that in one way, and then we immediately are, back doing it another way. So other ways that we can be compliant is, particularly for women, is having sex when we don't want to. Because our bodies allow us to have sex when we really don't want to. But particularly if you've ever lived with a narcissist, and you're just like, well, I can't say no because the next 2 days he'll be in a sulk, or he'll take all the money out of the account, or he won't come back and we won't have that dinner, like whatever it is, like what that's like. And wow, think about how disempowering that is, to be having sex when you really don't want to. Or maybe for you, the thing that is really disempowering is when you are, something as simple as you don't want to spend your Sunday going around to his parents every Sunday. And yet you're doing it because you're compliant, because he wants it. But it's your Sunday. Right now, yeah, there's give and take in relationships, but no, like what he should want for you is for you not to be miserable. And if he likes visiting his parents, great, then he does that. And every now and then, every couple of months, you join in, right? But we're so compliant that we just kind of give ourselves away for less than nothing. And another way we can be compliant is when we don't give our opinions the spotlight. So codependency is really heightened through things like social media. It's not created by it. Narcissists and self-absorbed people are not created by social media. Neither are codependents. It's just highlighted. It's just kind of magnified. It's like, in our days, the more narcissistic or the more self-absorbed are constantly giving their opinion or their say or their beliefs more airtime. They're doing that already. And then that's magnified when they are, every single day, 3 times a day on Facebook Live, posting endless pictures about themselves, and all of that stuff. I'm not saying that if you do that stuff, that makes you a narcissist or self-absorbed. I'm just saying that, that tendency then that is in those people is just magnified, but equally the tendency that's in the more compliant codependence is that we are being hyper vigilant for, will anyone have a problem with what I post? And we end up posting less, we end up making less money, we end up just in that lesser space, simply because we are not giving our opinions a spotlight. Our first concern is, will people be okay with me taking this time to explain my opinion? Will people be okay with me, taking their time? I used to be terrible at selling from the stage, because I would teach and teach and teach and teach, and then I'd be like almost apologetically in the last 5 minutes saying, "Oh, and this is what I'm selling you," rather than just no, like people need to know what I'm doing. They need to take the time. Oh, speaking of which, good cue, well done, Judy May. Wasn't intentional, but I do have a 10-week full immersion codependency course coming up. So it's 90 minutes every week with lots and lots of reading. So if you don't like reading or listening to books, and you don't love ideas, and if you'd rather just kind of do it on a surface level and you're fine with that, this will not be for you. But if you really want to get to grips with this and you really want to go deep with it, it is a 12-week course starting at the end of February. But we're asking people to sign up now because there is some pre-reading to be done. So there's certain texts we want you to be okay with, so you can just be good with the language that we're using, and also so that you can just really, there's a really in-depth questionnaire as well with this course, so that you can really start to work out what it is you need to work out before you start the course. So we're putting the link up for that. By the way, so it starts on 25th. It's going to be Sunday evenings, UK time. Early Sunday evenings UK time, late Sunday evenings in places like Sweden and Finland, then earlier on Sunday for those of you who are listening from America. That's what we're going to be doing there, and it runs for 12 weeks, taking off obviously Easter Sunday, because hey, right? Compliance patterns, right? The next one then is avoidance patterns. Now, I mentioned self-isolation as a big way of avoiding, but there's lots of different ways that as codependents we avoid. Now, this is really interesting there, because avoidance is usually seen as a narcissistic trait. But the thing about codependence is we tend to be aware of our clinginess and our longing for people, and we seem to be unaware for the ways that we are avoidant. It might show up like, I really liked that person, but as soon as they liked me, I went off them, or being really passionate about some project and then just kind of going off it. Other ways that we are avoidant is when we suppress feelings. Like when we go into another thing we'll be doing in depth, the CPTSD defense responses of fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. When we do those, we either we're distracting ourselves, or we're like doing all this amazing activity. Activity is overpraised, by the way. and or we're kind of like, pushing back, or we're, you know, really getting involved in the community. We've got to be aware when we're doing that in order to suppress our feelings. And the cue to this is like, if you stop, full stop, and stop the voices going on in your head, are you okay? Because most people, when as soon as the silence comes up, they're crying or angry or numb, So a lot of the time we just avoid feeling what we're feeling. We suppress it, and it becomes illness with, women later on in life. Then, well, with everybody, it's been shown that that the more you suppress your feelings, the more you've got um, masking type chemicals going on, the more likely you are to create illnesses, cancers, and things like that later in life, and we don't want that. The next thing then is control patterns. So this is the final type, right? And then we're going to go into the other stuff. But control patterns are really interesting because we don't tend to see ourselves as controlling. We tend to see ourselves as lovely. But, there's a really great phrase in the codependent movement that help is the sunny side of control. Help and being helpful is the sunny side of control. And because really what we're trying to do is we're trying to get other people to be better, whereas really our focus needs to be on us. So we think that if we get other people to be better, that then, makes our world safer and shows us that we are capable after all. And so the, taking care of people when it's their job to take care of themselves, that is a way of controlling. So if there's someone who, I'm thinking of someone I know who has a teenage daughter, and he kind of like hovers over her, and he will, she's more than capable of making dinner for both of them, but instead he'll make her dinner, and he'll be like, now, do you like this? And do you like that? And do you like whatever? And his mind, he's being lovely, and he is a lovely, lovely man. But really what he's doing is he's controlling her. He's like, he's afraid that she won't be able to cope with her own negative feelings of growing up, and because of some of the stuff that's happened to her. He's not allowing her to have her own experience. He's trying to control that. And then, when he's controlling that, then he doesn't have to be fearful. That's one less thing that he needs to be fearful about, rather than, allowing her to grow. And, if you're, so the test for this, and often people push back when I say this, the test for this is are they over 16? Are they not in crisis and not yours? Or are they not elderly, like, kind of like in dementia, not able? So are they actually capable of doing that thing for themselves? If they are, let them do it. That's why teenagers need to be making the dinner a couple of times a week. Teenagers need to be doing their own laundry. Teenagers need to be going out and doing the shopping. Like I was kind of overused in that way, as we all were as kids in my household. But these days, a lot of times, codependents are trying to give their kids a better experience, but really they're controlling their kids. So, and it is a fine line, but also look at, how do you feel? Like, what do you do when you see someone who's upset? Do you rush over to make it all okay, to make them laugh and show them what a cool, awesome person you are, that you can get them out of that? Or do you just kind of, like, what I've learned to do now is I'll just keep my distance, and I will just look, glance up every now and then. Are they okay? Yep, they're okay. They're doing their thing. Whereas before, I used to be just straight in there, right? And coaching and helping, or just being the fun person, or, there with hugs. Can I give you a hug? At the complete strangers. It was absolutely enmeshed nonsense, but I really thought that it was, me doing something. But no, my job then, if I'm only available for other people, I'm not available for me. And my dream isn't happening if I'm over there hugging someone else. So while they're doing their crying, right? And again, if it got unmanageable, or they really needed me, they really were in crisis, then of course I would step in, but I'd step in minimally. I remember one time I was out and about with my ex-fiance, and this guy had been being taunted by this group of teenagers, and they threw a rock at him. At first, we didn't know what had happened. We just heard like this big crowd, like it was actually Valentine's night. We just come out of the theater, huge crowd, and just heard this like gasp from the crowd. And being the kind of person I am, I just rushed straight in. And there was a guy who had what looked like a bullet wound to his forehead. It looked like he'd been shot in the head, but in fact, a rock had hit him right there. So, but he was still like in a really, really bad way. But the thing was, I have certain training from, being leadership at different events. I have also two parents who were doctors. Often medical cases would just land on our doorstep literally, and I'd have to deal with it if my parents weren't in. So I'm pretty good in a crisis. So did everything, did the necessary, took care of it. But then the second the guys arrived, the ambulance guys arrived, I just looked at the ambulance guy and said, "You good?" And he said, "Yeah." And they didn't need anything else from me. I just gave them a really quick report. I said, his breathing is more labored. He's now no longer responding. He's no longer talking. And then just out. Whereas before, I would have made that like my drama. I would have stuck around. I would have spoken to people about it. I would have, you know, do you get what I mean? Like there's like a different way of being. There's a much more boundaried way of being that frees up tons and tons and tons of energy for you that wasn't available before. Um, this is what we got to do is we've got to start working out because we've got a really, really funky idea of what's mine and what's yours in terms of, what's mine to experience and take responsibility for and what's yours. Like a lot of codependents have this Cinderella complex as well. We think that it's the guy's job to, rescue us in some way, or it's our job to rescue. No one needs to be rescuing anybody, right? That's not the deal. We're all just doing our thing. So another different ways that control patterns show up are sometimes people will use things like sexual attention or achievements out in the world, or different things to just control how people think about us. Like it's a very human thing to do, but we do it much more as codependents. Like we want to be seen. We're devastated if someone doesn't like us. We are devastated because we're trying to control how the world sees us. I used to just have to go in and fix it and justify and make it all okay if someone thought I wasn't very nice. And now I'm just kind of like, okay, no, that's fine. That's their version of Judy May. I'm super content with my version of Judy May. I think she's doing well, big-hearted, really emotionally disciplined. Doing pretty good after a really really tough start for the first 45 years. So this is what we need to do: is we need to just realize that letting go of control can feel very, very unsafe, very unsafe. And so we have to make sure that we're doing it um, within a framework that we are fully supported as we go. Um, the the other part of controlling is: do you need to be needed? Are you setting it up so that you're invaluable? Like codependents will often be like the key person in a business. Like it is not their business. I often see this where there's like a very powerful man, and then there's a woman who does pretty much most of the work. I'm thinking about a woman who came to me for coaching, and it was about 10 years ago, and she was the right hand woman to um, the one of the most powerful real estate moguls in the world, and she already had achieved a lot, but basically she needed for him to need her. She was like addicted to that, to his shine, his glory, his power, even though she had created a situation where she was completely financially free, never need worry about it another day in her life. And but she just needed to be needed. The idea that if you're invaluable, they can't get rid of you. Another thing that we're going to be doing on the course is looking at things like attachment disorders, attachment complexes, and all that sort of stuff, because it's all behind the this stuff that we're talking about. Because we need to know that we're using the right tool to fix the right thing. So the thing that will work to heal your denial patterns won't work to heal your control patterns, and so on. Another way that we can see it with codependence is that we give things. We give compliments really quickly. We give gifts above and beyond what we need to be giving. I remember one time I was 17 years old, and I was spending the summer in my uncle Nat's place with my cousins in the States. And I only had a very small amount of money to last the entire summer. And I didn't spend it. And I was pretty uncomfortable. And I could have gone and, I would go out with everybody, and they would have something to eat and I would just have an iced tea. Right. And those kind of things, simply because I was making sure that I could bring everyone back in my family, bring everyone back a really great gift that they weren't even grateful for. So, is sort of just a visible outward show of what's going on inwardly. And in the same way as, really complimenting and reassuring people can be a way of you trying to compliment, reassure yourself that that they're not going to go, that you are invaluable. So see that there we just kind of done a little run through. This is just such a big topic, and what I'm interested in for the next for when we do the course is that recently I've been mostly focused on the narcissism part of it. How to understand why we are completely attracted to and attracted why narcissists find us attractive and why we find them so attractive. Like, why does that work as a dynamic, and how can we get free of that, and how can we recognize narcissists? But what we're really doing in this is just healing our side of it. Just there'll be a little bit about just making sure that you're not allowing the narcissist to get in and upset your great work that you're doing. But it really is just all about self-healing and just going, moving forward with that and making it all about you for once and finally, right? So this is just really, really important that we made that happen, because otherwise, what does it cost us? What does it cost us? And sometimes it's really obvious. So sometimes you're like, oh my gosh, that really unhealthy situation in that company or in that marriage, that cost me 7 years. That cost me like nights where I could have been happily asleep. I was awake. I was anxious. That cost me my health. That cost me this. So sometimes it's really obvious what it's costing you. But what I'm interested in is the unseen cost that is just it's you're doing things so much in the way that most people on the planet are doing them that you don't see the cost to you and to your dream. And so it could be something like just leaving your own reality to just wonder how someone's doing. I'll find this often when people have recently got divorced or recently separated from someone, and they're like, yeah, so I think he's thinking, and you're just like, honey, what he's thinking is none of our business. None of our business. And it's those little moments all added together. It's that way of self-abandoning. Self-abandoning doesn't start with, starving to death in a garret. It starts with thoughts. It starts with just moment to moment, just taking your focus off you. But if there hasn't been a strong enough you, how are you going to do that? So this is what we're going to do, is we're going to make sure that we build a really strong sense of self, that we then work out, how do we keep the focus on that self consistently? Also things like, how do we get to grips with the denial patterns, low self-esteem patterns, but set it up so that it's instant, set it up that you can't do otherwise. Have it that it's impossible for anyone to drag you back to your codependence, because you're going to be, behaving your way to success. You're going to be acting as if. You're going to have a whole framework for this is how people who are absolutely not codependent and not narcissistic, so people who are like in that healthy middle ground, that golden mean, this is exactly how they think, feel, behave. And just getting you to do that immediately. So it's going to be all about behaving your way to success. It's not going to be about healing and then hoping that you'll someday maybe, if then be able to, if you do another course. No, it's all about getting that done immediately. So yes, it is a lot of internal work and a lot of looking at what happened and what is happening, and really really getting nuance on it, because that subtle stuff is pure gold. And usually you can actually reverse engineer it. So you can ask yourself, where am I really unhappy with my results? Well, I just feel that. It might be, I feel that I'm just wasting too much time. I feel that I know what to do and I'm not following through with it. Okay, great. Let's look at that. Why is that? Why? How can we analyze that from the point of view purely of codependence, of the codependent way of being? And there's 20 different ways that it could be at the very, very least. And that's what we're going to do. That's how we're going to start to unlock it. You're going to start to learn how to think about you and the world and your activities in a very, very different way. Because as I say, I've always been super good at strategy. I've always been really good at just, making the phone calls, doing the hustle, selling the deal, being brave for 10 minutes. I've always been super good at that. And so what was happening was, I would get to a certain point, and then it would all like I'd fall back down the mountain again. I would suddenly be, on this amazing TV show. Like I'm thinking back to the early 2000s, I'd be on this amazing TV show, and then I would, take my eye off me, or something. And usually I wouldn't be able to explain it, so I'd explain it as something that it wasn't. I'd be like, oh, I just decided I'd finish with that, or I just decided that this was more important. Or suddenly I would go and I would be, doing really great things on book tours, and then suddenly I would just go and volunteer, or I'd be making loads of money for myself, and then suddenly I would start to support a charity. And this is the thing that, people who are involved with charities before they've reached a point of financial freedom tend to be either codependent or narcissistic. They tend to be on either end of the spectrum, because really the healthy thing to do is to say, let me get myself sorted first. That's my job, and then there'll be more of me to give. But instead, we run all the patterns around that, and we sort of say, no, that's the thing to do. I'm helping others, and it's helping me. It's like, we really can torque and twist our brains into the most extraordinary things, and that's why we end up with patchy results. So, that is how you can know that you want to change it, because you know what, you don't have to change it. There are people didn't have options before. Like, if you think back to maybe your grandmother, or even someone who you knew in childhood, and you sort of think, yeah, they lived and died behaving in this codependent way as a codependent. And I just didn't want that for myself. I don't want that for you either. I want you to have this freedom that I now have. It's very different. It's very, very different. It's less confusing. It's way less tiring. And you can just get stuff done easier, and you can just feel safe and believe yourself. And that really is what I want for you. So please do join us for this course. It's £400 sterling. It's 12 weeks. It takes place online on Sunday evenings. And I'm going to put up a couple of, I'll just put them up on Twitter and on if you go to What Exactly is Codependence, the event on Facebook, I'll put the link up there as well tonight. And so you can get yourself sorted. But do it tonight, because again, as codependents, what we do is we say, yeah, 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 and then we immediately get dragged somewhere else. So make this the time where you actually, for once, this time, you got it, follow through and put yourself first, and do make it happen for you. So great to meet with you here this evening, and I really look forward to doing the work with you and getting you to that better, way better place. All right, talk soon. Take care. Bye now.